The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
And away we go. Another week of fantasy basketball is upon us. And I am attempting with all of my might to have some energy at the start of a podcast. Yes, that's right. I'm always trying to better myself. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, everybody. I am Dan Besbris. Well, it's Monday, which means I could have started the show with a big sigh, a deep breath, and a here we go. But no, because over the weekend, Jimmy Butler was traded. Yes, it finally happened. I started to think it never was going to happen, and it did. It happened quickly after we all sort of gave up hope. He's now a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. Dario Saric, Rob Covington, members of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I believe there was a patent involved in this trade, but nobody cared. And so we resettle. We shake it up. Shake up the West, shake up the East. Mostly the East with this one. And Jimmy Butler gets to go mentor Markelle Fultz. But I kid. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. You can, of course, follow Hoop Ball. That's where we're coming from. We're coming from you from my outpost in the Hoop Ball headquarters, which is my bedroom. That is, of course, at Hoopball Fantasy and at Hoopball Tweets. We got a lot on the docket for you today. It's Monday, which means there's a reverse chronological lightning round coming up in the not-too-distant future. We got to prep you for a Monday night slate, which lately has been more significant than in seasons past. It's a 9-game Monday today. We've also got an interview with Lucas Johnson of the Sixers Sense talking about what this trade means for the 76ers, who's going to pick up some of the slack, with two bodies going one way and one sort of legitimate body going the other way. Again, I don't mean to denigrate the fringy players that move in these trades, but let's be honest here. The guys that are going to be seeing minutes as a result of this trade are the three names that we already mentioned, Rocco, Saric, and, of course, Butler. So then it raises the question in Philadelphia of, okay, Jimmy Butler's in town. He's basically a shooting guard, small forward type. That wasn't even really one of the positions that was in big question out there. Rob Covington was playing a lot of small forward when Saric was the 4 and Embiid was the 5, but there were plenty of stretches where Covington could actually slide up and play a little small ball 4 when Saric wasn't on the floor. So you got this opening for, is it Mike Muscala? Is it Wilson Chandler? And more importantly, does it matter? So we're going to talk to Lucas about that, dig into the Philly side. Tomorrow, we'll get Eric Goldman back on the show to tell us about the Minnesota side, and Ben Vasconcelos with the Washington Wizards Wiz of Oz blog. That segment, which was originally scheduled to air today, will air most likely on Wednesday of this week. We just had, you get these insane breaking news stories, and then other things have to shift around a little bit. And that's the plan. That's the plan for today, fellas and ladies. I don't know who's listening to this pod. I assume it's both. I hope it's both. So we might as well jump into it, I guess. I was thinking about what we got going on over at Hoop Ball. We'll tell you about that after Reverse Chronological Lightning Round. That's what you tune in for on a Monday, right? You want to just dive right in and go crazy. So let's do it. We'll start with Sunday. We'll work our way back through the Saturday and Friday cards, make sure we've covered every single team in the NBA, their most recent ball game, and get you reset for the week ahead. Charlotte at Detroit. I could not think of a more boring game to have at noon on a Sunday out here on the left coast. This was, if I had to pick two teams that I didn't want to watch, this probably would have been them. And the game was actually okay, by all accounts. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist turned his ankle. That's the story, certainly from the Charlotte side, which means a few more minutes at the power forward spot opening up, and that's probably Marvin Williams. Not that he's what you'd call a traditional, blasting stream guy, because he's not going to go out there and take a whole bunch of shots. But if Marvin ends up playing 30 minutes a game, if Kidd-Gilchrist misses a week or whatever it turns out to be, we'll find out, then there is that little wiggle room there. It's not a big-time move-the-needle thing. It's maybe just the Marvin that we were hoping for at the start of the year, which was like top 90 kind of numbers, which hasn't happened. Jeremy Lamb played 24 minutes in this game. He actually ended up losing playing time to Tony Parker, who blew up for 24. So I can't really argue with it because the results were there. It's just annoying because if Parker didn't go big, Malik Monk had a terrible game. He went 0 for 5, took bad shots. This is what I'm seeing, by the way. Monk has a really nice jumper, really good-looking shot, but his shot selection has been extremely poor. It's a young man's shot selection. He's not taking it in the flow of the offense. And they just keep trying to sort of ram his three-point shooting into the lineup. When he's not hot, he is a big-time negative. But hopefully strides will be made there. Point of all this is Jeremy Lamb looked like he was on his way to a really nice ball game, and then Tony Parker scooped his fourth quarter minutes and ended up being just a decent ball game. But I'm getting all these questions like, do I give up on Jeremy Lamb? And the answer is absolutely not. He's been solid this year, guys. He's just been sort of coasting along, even without getting all the minutes that he could have. In 24 minutes a game, he's a top 75 fantasy player in 9-cat. That's not something you give up on. Stop it. Reggie Bullock had his night for the month, and so then he can go back into hibernation for a little bit. He's just not an interesting player to own. He's outside the top 200, so let's not go crazy for one big game. And Reggie Jackson's fantasy game is just terrible. I know that there were points and assists in this one, but everything else was bad. That's just how that one goes. Indiana at Houston. The rotations for the Pacers continue to suck. This team is so annoying. So annoying to own anybody on. I mean, they were all bad, except for Victor Oladipo, who's generally okay, although his shooting in this game was atrocious. Made up for it with the fact that it was a pretty well-rounded line, but when you shoot under 30% on 24 shots, that's probably going to hurt you more than it helps. Oladipo has climbed back into the top 20 in 9-cat after a very slow start, so perhaps you bought low, and if so, then fine. Bojan Bogdanovic had his game of the month so far, and that's annoying too because, for one, he's outside the top 100, and, he's having a good shooting year by all accounts, but that meant that there just weren't as many shot attempts for anybody else. It was all Oladipo and Bogdanovic in this one. Derek Collison actually took 10 shots, and, he was really like one made free throw away from having an okay ball game, but he's been terrible at the foul line this year, and the yanking around of everybody in Indiana, Nate McMillan seems almost like he's getting desperate at times in the early going, has been obnoxious. You're 8-6, guys. You're hanging in there okay, but let's not reinvent the wheel. You guys know that I was fading the Pacers this year from a team season win total standpoint. I stand by that. They don't look like the same team that caught teams off guard last year. They look screwy. Like they're trying to play guys that don't belong. Miles Turner hasn't made strides. Tyreek Evans looks like a terrible fit. I honestly don't know what they're doing out there. I just don't know what they're doing. It was nice to see Darren Collison at least play 35 minutes yesterday. He should just be the point guard. Stop dicking around with a ton of Corey Joseph and a bunch of Tyreek Evans. It's just not working, guys. Go back to what worked. Meanwhile, James Harden, Chris Paul, both actually look pretty good for once. Paul still can't make his free throws. I got to think that's going to level off. PJ Tucker, 4 3-pointers on 6 shots. He was a steal away from having a classic PJ Tucker line. So you guys know that I am sort of a PJ Tucker-ophile. I have a soft spot for all of these old guys that just that do some stuff and then don't turn the ball over. I love them. Problem is, for me, at least on some teams, where I have both Danny Green and PJ Tucker, it's almost like I've gone overkill in that department. And the other problem is you're not going to be able to trade those types of guys. Maybe Danny Green, but I doubt PJ Tucker because it's just so boring to look at until you dig into the numbers, and then it's like, oh, this is actually pretty sweet, but most people don't have the patience for that. So if you had to cut one of them, it would be PJ. I would recommend holding it. But if you're on a team where it's like, look, I don't have any turnovers. I'm destroying everybody in turnovers and 3-pointers. I got to go roll the dice on somebody. I understand. I still love him, though. Orlando, quietly playing a little bit better these days. I don't know if anybody's taken notice of this, but they've actually won 4 of their last 5 ball games. And it's not all against cake teams. It's a fairly easy schedule, but they did beat the Spurs in there. The other wins are over the Cavs, the Wizards, and the Knicks. They lost to the Pistons. But still, going 4-1 over any stretch is nothing to sort of shake a stick at. They're 6-7 on the year now. They're 3-2 at home. They actually have a winning home record. Yeah, the Orlando Magic. You heard that right. And it's all happening without Jonathan Isaac, who has some ankle issues, and it's getting to be a little bit annoying. I think you still have to hold there. I'd love it if he could make any kind of progress. We're hearing nothing. He's just out all the time. And Terrence Ross continues to be a fantastic streaming option, which I thought was going to be for like a week, but it's stretching longer than that. There's the guy maybe you could roll the dice on. Terrence Ross, he's scoring like 15 points a night with Jonathan Isaac out, knocking down 2.5 triples, steals, blocks, turning it over too many times for a guy doing what he does, but he's been pretty good in that role. Otherwise, this is just a blowout game, so everybody on Orlando played 25 minutes, and some of them did okay with it, and other ones didn't. No Aaron Gordon, by the way, either, so more shots for everybody else. On the Knicks side, remember we said to just hang on to Mitchell Robinson because big man upside doesn't grow on trees? Well, a cursory glance at his game would seem as though it was another ugly one. He played 22 minutes. He had 4 points and 4 rebounds. Just wasn't involved at all. A usage rate of 5, but 9 blocked shots. 9 blocked shots for Mitchell Robinson, which ties a season high for anybody in the NBA. Hassan Whiteside had a 9er last week as well. Robinson now, by the way, over his last 4 basketball games, has 16 blocked shots and almost nothing else. But that's basically all you need to be fantasy relevant. If you average 4 blocks and basically zeros across the board, you're inside the top 115. It's unbelievable how easy it is to jump over like 2/3 of the NBA. Because most fantasy teams, at least in a roto format, you average about 0.75 blocks per game played over the course of a roto season. And this is, 4, that's almost 6 times that. So he's like a 6 spot in that category. It's 6 times what you'd need to win that from any one player. So it basically means you could roll 5 guys out there that get a goose egg, and you still win it. And folks, that's with 4. Remember, we're talking about a 4 right now, not the 9 that he actually put on the board. Yes, now nobody's going to average 9 blocks a game. This is, by all accounts, this will likely be the highest total he posts at any point this season. But it does tell you that even in a game where they were getting shellacked, they wanted him out there just to see how it goes, to learn on the fly. If he has to pick on some guys in garbage time, that's fine too. Anyway, point is, you're holding. You're holding hard. Tim Hardaway Jr. had an off shooting night. He'll be okay in the next one. Knicks as a team just really need more offense. And this is what surprised me when they went to this weird new lineup with Damian Dotson and Frank Ntilikina and Noah Vonleh. It seemed like they were going to be in a really tight spot for scoring if Tim Hardaway Jr. wasn't having a good shooting night. And this is what we saw. They just got run out of the building. Kevin Knox, again, scoring only. If you're in a league where that's valuable, that's fine. If you're in a standard league, he's not. It just, the fantasy makeup is not really there. Milwaukee-Denver, thoroughly uninteresting fantasy game. Thank goodness we finally get to basically skip over one. Oh, Giannis still can't shoot free throws. I put that in a tweet storm last night, and I'm doing it again because I kind of think it's funny that people all think I hate Giannis. So now I'm just leaning into it. By the way, he's shooting a high-volume 66% at the foul line this year. That'll probably get better, although it got way worse the last 2 days when I think he went a combined 5 for 16. That's the danger, man. If he doesn't have the three-pointer or fix his free throws, he had no way to get over that last hump. Boston-Portland, also a relatively uninteresting fantasy game. Hooray! We got 2 in a row that we can basically just blitz through. Nothing on the Boston side. Still a lot of mouths to feed. Jason Tatum had a better ball game in this one. Kyrie Irving has 5 steals in this game. That was kind of interesting as well. Damian Lillard turned up the passing quotient in this basketball game. Got Nurkic involved, got Aminu involved. I know that, okay, I'm going to break from hoop ball a little bit on this one. I'm kind of down on Zach Collins. Guys that haven't done it before, doing it in very few minutes, that makes me really nervous. Whereas, like with Valanciunas, we saw him do it in fewer minutes all of last season. He proved it. With Collins, he hasn't really proven himself to me yet. He hadn't have a block since November 3rd. That's a stretch of 5 basketball games. I'm out on Collins. I know everybody else is in, but I'm out. I'm out on him. It's just not enough there. If he's not hitting threes and not blocking shots, he's no longer poor man's Brook Lopez. Now he's just a kind of a clunky backup center. I'm out. By the way, Al-Farouq Aminu, he falls into that category for me of like PJ Tucker and Danny Green, of just old guys that mostly rebound and do defensive stuff and hit some threes. And his numbers are actually worse than the other two guys for reasons unknown, actually. Let me compare them head to head. This actually surprised me when I pulled it up. He's behind him, and it's mostly because of the field goal percent number. He's down at 40. PJ Tucker is approaching 45 with all of that stuff, and Danny Green is at 44. Plus, he's got a block on his ledger as well, so that's why Danny Green's out in front. But Aminu's in that list as well. It's just going to be boring guys to own, but they should be on a roto team somewhere. Atlanta Los Angeles Lakers got a last-second block from Tyson Chandler, who looks completely revitalized in L.A., to win this game 107-106. As a Laker fan, I was relieved. As a fantasy guy, I was watching closely, and no, I'm not worried about JaVale McGee yet. He missed some free throws yesterday, and he missed some shots, but he's still the starter on this team. If that flip-flops, I still don't care, because there's sort of no universe where either one of these guys gets way over 25 minutes a game. It's never going to be like a 28-20 or a 30-18 split. It's always going to be like 27-21, 26-22, that kind of window, even a straight-up 24-24. JaVale McGee only needs 20 minutes a game to be fantasy relevant. We knew he wasn't going to be a top 25 guy all year, but he still had 3 blocks and a steal yesterday, still had 9 rebounds, and if he doesn't miss 6 shots, you're talking about a guy who goes like 5 for 9 instead of 3 for 9, then it's a great game. Don't panic. I don't think it's a buy low, because I do think his arrow is coming down a little bit from that crazy start, but don't panic. Don't panic. By the way, Lonzo Ball looked really good in this ball game, and then for whatever reason, they took him out because Trae Young was getting hot, and they put Brandon Ingram on Young instead, and that actually ended up being a really good decision, because if they wanted to make sure that they had someone that was running the offense, it was actually a pretty good move this time, although it wasn't really Lonzo's fault that JaVale McGee was over-rotating and other guys were not covering the right guy. You could see the look on Lonzo's face. It was like, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do on defense, and nobody else is where they're supposed to be. But they ended up winning the game because they got a little bit lucky. We'll take it. Kent Bazemore, monster game that rocketed him from a top 90 guy all the way to number 61 in 9-cat overnight with this whopper. He's an HB6 guy. The note on this ballgame, the thing that was most encouraging, Taurean Prince, 23 points on 13 shots, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, 5 three-pointers. He still turned it over 5 times, and that is a little bit soul-crushing because he's not the point guard. You can't be posting a 1-assist, 5-turnover game. I mean, he's got a 2 to 3 assist-to-turnover ratio this year, basically. That's not good. You got to get that number down if you're not the point guard. But the field goal percent that raised his field goal percent like 1.5 percentage points in one game. That's how quickly these numbers can bounce back for guys. He's still outside the top 100, but hopefully this is the sign of things to come. Alex Len, I don't know, man. He's number 182. This is his first good game in about 2 weeks. Nah, you're not doing that. Jeremy Lin did not play much time at point guard even in this game. He did actually see a couple of minutes at the 2 again, but this is what happens when you're not getting a ton of minutes and why he's sort of stuck in this Dan Besbris, I can't stop watching in case he actually turns a corner and gets more consistent minutes zone. And obviously this was a game that was more on the outside of that, looking in. Going back to Saturday, Toronto hosted the Knicks. We already talked about New York. Haven't talked about Toronto. They're just clobbering people. Pascal Siakam was great. Danny Green had 4 turnovers again. I don't know what the hell he's doing. He has 9 turnovers in his last 2 games, but he still had 3 steals, 3 3-pointers in this one. And so, Danny, I forgive you. No, I'm not worried about the minutes. This was a blowout. Nobody on Toronto played more than 28 minutes in this ballgame, and that was Pascal Siakam. Clippers, Milwaukee. The Clippers, with Avery Bradley out, got some consistent production out of their guards in this game. It was, of course, a very high-scoring overtime basketball game, so it's not really a one-to-one thing. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 16, 6, and 4 with a steal and 3 blocks. The blocks obviously are unsustainable. I'm sort of slow on the SGA train right now, and I know that makes me kind of in the minority, and I'm okay with that on this one. And I also believe that there's a strong chance I'm wrong. But when I look at his game, when I watch him on the floor, it hasn't to this point translated great from a fantasy perspective. There are a couple games mixed in there where the fantasy numbers were a little bit better, but he hasn't been big on the assist front. I mean, 4 assists from your point guard or shooting guard, whatever you want to say. I mean, he and Pat Beverly are kind of interchangeable there. In a 40-minute game, he was out there for 40 minutes, is the thing that worries me. He doesn't grab many rebounds. His steals and blocks are decent. They're decent, but they're not fantastic. I mean, he's already averaging 27 minutes a game on the season, and he's averaging 0.8 steals, 0.8 blocks. So the blocks are nice. He's a very long kid, but the 3 blocks in that last game actually pulled that number up in a pretty big way. The scoring, I think, is going to come and go a little bit. He does appear to be a pretty decent foul shooter as this young guy. To me, he's one of those dudes that, at least right now, is a much better reality player than fantasy. The hope is obviously that some of this begins to translate, but I'm just not totally sold. I think they've got a game with Golden State and then San Antonio coming up here. And then who knows with Avery Bradley? I guess we'll see him at some point with the ankle sprain. There are just still so many guys ahead of him in the Clippers pecking order. Danilo Gallinari, Tobias Harris, Lou Williams. I would argue even Montrezl Harrell probably ahead of him in the pecking order. Maybe Pat Beverly, probably not, because he doesn't do a whole lot on the offensive side, but he is doing a decent amount of ball handling. So is Lou Williams. So to me, the fact that he played 40 minutes was very encouraging. He played the second most minutes of anybody on the team. Gallo played 41, which means he's going to be injured in a week. That's a good sign for Gilgeous-Alexander. But outside of the blocks and the rebounds in this game were both kind of anomalies. And overtime, everything gets extended by an extra 10 to 15% or whatever you want to talk about. So if you're looking at a guy who's going to score like 13 with 3 and 3, that just doesn't excite me that much. He's going to probably be a 12-team guy, but I have a feeling he's going to be more towards the end of your bench because I don't see that electrifying upside, at least not while still this many Clippers are out there on the floor. Also worth mentioning, by the way, they played a game against a team that could run a little bit, and Boban played less than 1 second. Yes, that you heard that right. He played 0.3 of a second in this game. It didn't even register on a lot of box scores. He played the last 0.3. I think he got his hand on an inbound pass and helped secure the win. But this is why he's not ownable, because there are going to be games where the Clippers play against teams that can exploit his size and lack of speed, and he's just not going to see the floor. Golden State, the next one. That's one of those games. San Antonio, he probably plays because LaMarcus Aldridge is not that fast. Brooklyn, probably not. Atlanta, well, maybe against Alex Len. Washington, Dwight Howard, yeah, you probably see him out there a little bit. So, maybe you can pick your spots a little, but to have him just sitting on a roster where you got to play your guys all the time, that's just probably not going to work. If you got him in a games cap spot, yeah, maybe you could drop him in there against some traditional centers. Milk is 1 to 2 games a week where He's going to play 20 minutes? I guess. That's a possibility. Anyway, let's keep moving. Phoenix, New Orleans, TJ Warren, back-to-back really strong games. He looks like he's locked in as the starter here. You can start him, I believe, with relative confidence. I mean, he's a good percentages guy. He's added the 3-ball to his game. He's never been a big-time defensive stats dude, although he did get better at them last year than in previous seasons, and then, injuries sort of beset. In fact, I guess you could argue the last 2 seasons he made some strides on the defensive end of the fantasy ledger. Not so much so far this year. 0.6 and 0.8. 1.4 combined is not the worst thing in the world, but it's not great. His free throw shooting has been outstanding. I don't know if that's going to be coming back down a little bit. I've got to believe it does. But you're still talking about a guy who's sitting inside the top 70 right now. Top 70 guys, you got to play him. I know this makes me a bad hoop baller, but I'm also out on Rashawn Holmes. It's not enough minutes for a 12-team league right now. It's just not. Devin Booker's decision-making is terrible. I have to put that out there again. His passing is bad. His assist-to-turnover ratio of less than 2-1 as the de facto point guard is not good enough. And they got crushed. That's the end of that chapter. Cleveland, Chicago. This is a game where figured we'd learn something about the Cleveland side. Chicago, by the way, at this point in the year, to have only 9 men that can see the floor in a game, that's a little bit tough. That's a tough spot. But they won it. They won the game anyway, thanks largely to Wendell Carter Jr., Zach LaVine, and my guy, Justin Holiday. God, I love it. Justin Holiday falls into that category also of the low turnover, 9-cat specialist types. He's averaging 0.6 turnovers a game to go along with, and this is, by the way, pretty impressive for a guy who's never giving it away, almost 3 3-pointers a night, 2.8. Almost 12 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.6 steals, and half a block. And in this game, he went for 7-7, 2-2 with an assist and a 3-pointer. I mean, he's just like, he has to be out there. As long as Denzel Valentine is hurt, he has to be in your lineup. And we'll see what happens when Valentine comes back. But otherwise, there really isn't anybody that's challenging him for minutes. He played 37 in this game. That's the second most on the team. Why is he only 55% owned? It's got to be for 8-cat leagues, I guess, where the 0.6 turnovers don't make a difference. Guys, when you search for Holiday on Yahoo and you get Aaron, Justin, and Drew, you get the whole trifecta. Drew Holiday is at 39 and Justin's at 41. He's 2 slots behind him in 9-cat. One of these guys was drafted in the second round and the other was a free agent pickup. Please put him in your lineups. Please don't ask me about it anymore. Meanwhile, over on the Cleveland side, there was some lineup consistency in this game, but probably had something to do with the fact that George Hill, Sam Decker, and Cedi Osman were all out. Those are 3 starters for this team, as of the Larry Drew takeover, at least. So, you had to pare it down a little bit. The only sort of goofball spot on the floor was the J.R. Smith spot. And I don't even know what you want to call that. That's the shooting guard, I guess, or small forward. One of the wing spots was still very much up in the air. Otherwise, Tristan Thompson played 34 minutes and double-doubled. By the way, if he plays 28 minutes, he's going to get a 10-10 double-double. And if he gets any more than that, well, then you could see a game a little bit more like this one without the 22 points. More like, if you're starting Tristan Thompson, I would be more interested in the rebounding side of the ledger than the scoring. Right now, by the way, he's averaging 10.2 and 10.2. That's such a Tristan Thompson. Here's why I have some confidence here. Charlotte is the next opponent, then Washington, then Detroit, then the Lakers. These are all games where the Cavaliers should be somewhat competitive, which means he should get his third quarter minutes. And maybe he doesn't play, his 6 minutes at the end of the ball game or whatever, but that still gets you to 28. And to me, that's enough for him to have his 10 rebounds. So, specialist spot? Absolutely. In fact, over the last week, Tristan Thompson has been inside the top 80. Despite, by the way, basically missing all of his free throws because he shoots a good percentage from the field, usually. And he's averaging 17 and 14 over that stretch. I can't believe I'm saying it, but he deserves to be on a fantasy team. And he's not owned very many. Rodney Hood, I still don't trust it, although while everybody else is hurt, you sort of have to. Colin Sexton, same story. Nobody can pass on this team right now. They have no actual point guard, and it's sort of fallen to Jordan Clarkson a little bit. And then Larry Nance had 14 rebounds, a steal, and 4 blocks, and as long as Sam Decker is out, he's worth streaming as well, but it's quite possible he goes back to not existing when Decker returns because, well, what the hell? Things are weird, and once they get healthy, things are getting weirder. Philadelphia, Memphis, it's not even worth breaking down Philadelphia right now because they're about to add Jimmy Butler and Wilson Chandler and Mike Muscala. All of these guys are about to be back with Philadelphia or with them for the first time, so we'll analyze things when it comes down, and you're going to hear from Lucas Johnson in just a moment on what you should expect from this team anyway. Meanwhile, at Memphis, Slow-Mo, 8 points, 13 boards, a steal, and a block. He's coming around, guys. He's coming around. Garrett Temple also sort of hanging on right around the top 100 region of 9 category leagues. He's a very... He should fall into my category of not exciting veterans, but he doesn't because where the other guys pick up rebounds and blocks and more steals, Garrett Temple does with better shooting percentage. And if you're going to go for one of these 3-and-D guys, to me, they're such low-volume dudes that I'd rather get some of the defensive stats or maybe a counting stat as opposed to a slightly better shooting percentage. I know it's weird and it kind of goes against what I normally believe in, but with low-volume guys, the field goal percent is not something that you should be checkboxing right out of the chute. Good to see, by the way, Mike Conley kind of get going in this game. He's had a very quiet start to the year, but he's inside the top 60, and there's room for improvement on that. You're not buying Jeff Green in Washington. Don't even think about it. He just stole all of Markieff Morris's minutes in this game. Foul trouble, bad play, whatever you want to call it. But Washington did win the game. Hassan Whiteside, Josh Richardson, Rodney Magruder. Those are the heat that you can use right now in their current iteration. Goran Dragic, he had some foul issues, but just doesn't really look healthy. Justice Winslow's percentages are so terrible that I hope you didn't buy into that. Wayne Ellington, when he's playing 30 minutes, he can be really useful from the three-point line, but it's tough to know exactly when that's going to happen. So for me, Whiteside, Richardson, Magruder, those are the guys you trust right now. And maybe Goran Dragic, who to me is always overused in fantasy. His fantasy game has not been good for a long time, and yet people still keep trotting him out there like he's a top 50 guy. He's just not. Not a great foul shooter. Better this year, actually, in that regard. Not a great assist-to-turnover guy. Defensive numbers are down. His field goal percent, which is usually what floats him, is down this year as well. San Antonio in that next game, we already talked about Houston. San Antonio, really cool to see Derek White play 30 minutes in his second game back and go for 14, 4, and 8 with 2 steals and a three-pointer. That was about as encouraging a second game as anybody could have ever envisioned. He's owned in every one of my leagues, but I see that Yahoo has him listed as only 42% owned globally. So if he's out there, I hope to God you picked him up. There was only one league where I was even able to stash him. Everybody else, they had already picked him up. I mean, that's just, what a marvelous second game back. What a marvelous second game back. That was huge. I don't know that it's going to be that great every night, but that had to feel pretty good for those that stashed him. And, you know, the fact that he was able to ramp up that quickly, it's looking like between he and Bogdan Bogdanovic, he's probably the better stash just because he's getting going so fast. Brooklyn, Karis LeVert hurt himself. I think it was a knee, if memory serves, and only had 4 and 2 on 1 for 6 shooting, 2 for 4 at the free throw line, and a couple of turnovers. And it's not fair to talk about this game as like the downfall of Karis LeVert, but when you put this into the mix, he's now number 74 in 9-cat. And people keep talking about how I'm like trying to start a fight over Karis LeVert. I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just trying to be pragmatic in a way that people who get sort of caught up in the big counting numbers neglect to see some of the other stuff. He's still a very bad free throw shooter. It's a big impact. And he was able to overshadow that with his crazy like 55% shooting start. But we knew that was going to level off. And it's not fair to talk about an injury game as the game where it levels off. But lately he has been shooting the ball not quite as well. There's some big ones mixed in there. Make no mistake. He had that 29-point game with 3 steals. He had the 26-point game with 3 3-pointers. He is still vastly improved over seasons past. And by the way, in those seasons past, we warned you we're like, look, stay away. The percentages are going to kill you. The turnovers are going to kill you. He's not there yet. He is absolutely there this year. He should 100% be owned. He should be owned in all 100% of Yahoo leagues. And he's at 85% right now, which effectively is all of them. So like 6-team leagues, he's not owned, or some weirdo formats. 100%. He should be owned and started in all Yahoo formats, as far as I'm concerned. All formats. I don't care what you're playing in. He should be in there. But he's not the top 30 guy that he looked like for the first 2 weeks of the year. I thought top 60. He's now actually outside of that line. So would you call this a buy low? No, it's not. Because the people that have Caris LeVert are so heavily invested in this like weird defensive thing. When somebody says something bad about him, everybody gets really defensive about it. I don't want that to be the case. This is my soapbox moment for the podcast. We should not be getting defensive about fantasy players. If you have a guy and he's not performing well, for me, that's Darren Collison. Hard. It's not right to get defensive about him. You want to be pragmatic. And that's why basically I said, look, outside of 9-cat roto, you can probably drop Darren Collison. I think 9-cat roto, I think there's a way he still claws his way back to full season value. With Caris LeVert, I'm not trying to put you on your heels. I'm not attempting to insult someone who has Caris LeVert. In fact, like I said, he should be started in all formats. He's good, but he's not top 30 good. So when I said sell for a top 50 bona fide, a guy that's been in the top 50 for half a decade or whatever it is, redraft leagues, obviously, we're talking about redraft leagues. I mean, if you could look at the guys ranked from like 35 to 50 in your league and see who jumps out as interesting in that range. Drew Holiday, Rob Covington, Eric Bledsoe, Hassan Whiteside, Brooke Lopez, Andre Drummond, but you're not going to be able to get him. You don't want to do Serge Ibaka because that's likely going to cool off a little bit. I'm just talking about these guys that have done it before, where you're like, oh, that guy's a safe 30 to 50 range player. If that's a guy you could have gotten for Caris LeVert, that's an upgrade because you're taking the proven commodity. I'm not insulting LeVert. Please stop trying to construe it that way. Please stop. There are no fights happening. This is me, Dan, my opinion that Caris LeVert is not a top 30 fantasy player. He's a top 60 fantasy player. And so when you were able to sell high, that is why we were saying do it. It's just like stocks. Buy and sell when the time is right. Anyway, right now, he's actually likely to come back up a little bit. So he's down at the moment. But I still don't think you could buy low on him because I think there's this weird defensive mechanism that kicks in and you're not going to be able to get him on the cheap. It's the darndest thing. He's that guy this year. There's always one. I don't know who I can't remember who it was last year. There's always one where everybody gets real like claws out about it. We got to be pragmatic, folks. We have to be realistic in every respect. That's how you win. Anyway, I hope I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not picking on anyone in particular. There's this fight instinct, and we got to get rid of that. Quinn Cook, streaming option on the Warriors side. How's that for coming off the soapbox? Jeremy Grant, full season value. He's there, man. There's no point arguing about it anymore. He's in. After a couple of slow games to start the year, he's been cruising along at a top 75 clip, and he should be in all lineups. And he is. He's owned in every single one of my leagues. I had him in a couple of spots, and I had to drop him, which sucks. I had to clear out some space, and now somebody else has him, and I'm upset about it because I think I had the earliest pickup recommendation on him that I saw out there, at least. Maybe not. Probably somebody. There's always someone ahead of you. Dallas Wesley Matthews got hurt his hip. He's going to miss the next ball game or two or more. Hip and hamstring. It's both. When you're old, you get dinged up. Believe me, I know. What does that mean? Not much. I mean, this was kind of actually, believe it or not, a little bit of a blowout win, and the Mavs love to spread their minutes around, too. Whoever's playing well, they're going to be on the floor. Sacramento, they just got taken apart. Bogdan played 20 minutes in this game, 6-4-2. I mean, if you held on, you keep holding. I thought it would take him 2 weeks to get up to speed, and this was only his second game back. Look for game 5 or 6. That's where you should expect to see some decent numbers, and if he's not beginning to come around by then you can think about maybe moving on. I actually had to move on in one spot because I just need other stats, the stuff that I think he's going to be providing, which is some scoring, some threes, a little assist punch maybe off the bench, not a ton of defensive stats. It's just not something that fit the build for my fantasy team, so I had to move along. It sucks, but I have to do it. Sometimes you got to make these tough decisions. Let's go back to Friday, make sure we covered everybody. Looking at that Friday card, I think we may have actually hit all 30 teams. Anybody I'm forgetting? Well, Minnesota, but, you know. We will talk to Eric Goldman on tomorrow's podcast. We'll get a breakdown of where the minutes are going to go in Minnesota. My initial thought is that I'm seeing a drop recommendation on Taj Gibson. I would not preemptively drop him. You have to see how this shakes out a little bit. Remember, Thibodeau loves Taj. He's his guy. And Dario Saric defensively is not Taj Gibson. So let's wait and see how this whole thing shakes out. I could actually see a weird planet where Saric loses out. And Rob Covington is the guy who ends up taking a ton of minutes, shifting Wiggins potentially to the 2, or maybe even cutting into his minutes a little bit. I mean, the fact that there are just more guys in Minnesota now is going to hurt the fantasy values of most of these dudes, not Karl-Anthony Towns. I also think Derrick Rose is actually in an okay spot because even if his minutes take a slight hit, his usage won't. That was always the big fear, is that someone coming in would be a big usage guy. That's all Rose needs. He just needs usage because when he's on the floor, he's going to go a-chucking. And I don't think that's going to change. He'll be sort of the lead scoring dog of whatever unit he's in. So he's a hold. I think Wiggins takes a hit. I think Taj does take a hit, but I don't know if it knocks him completely out of 9-cat value. This is going to be an interesting thing. We'll ask Eric about it. We'll get his thoughts as well. But certainly, Cat's looking freed, man. It seems like the angry gaze is off of him. And that should be fun. If you traded for Karl-Anthony Towns in that first 2 or 3 games, that's a good spot to be in right now. Okay, well, that took too long, didn't it? Goodness gracious. Okay, let's talk to Lucas Johnson. Let's talk about the Sixers. That's what's next. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't start this segment by saying the great Lucas Johnson. Congratulations, Big Papa Lucas.
Oh, thank you.
You got a new addition to the Johnson family over the last couple of weeks since we last spoke on the podcast. How's everybody hanging in there over there?
Everybody's doing great. Thank you for asking.
Excellent. That's what we wanted to hear. Lucas Johnson, of course, is an expert at Sixer Sense. You can check that out at thesixersense.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Lucas Johnson NBA. And if you don't know why we got Lucas back on the pod, well, you've had your head under a rock a little bit because the Sixers traded for Jimmy Butler over the weekend. Robert Covington and Dario Saric, the big pieces headed back Minnesota's direction. And Lucas, I think you sort of know what we're going to do on today's show, and it's basically just to try to figure out who's going to do what now. I'm going to start with the easy ones, I think, and say, how do the roles of the superstar players change with the addition of Jimmy Butler? A lot, a little. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, how does this sort of acclimation process go in your mind?
Well, let's start with Simmons here. Simmons, you should see his points production probably slip because of just how dominant of a scorer Jimmy Butler is. His assists, however, should be about the same, if not increase. So overall, I think you might see more triple-doubles from Simmons, even though I believe he's already had at least 2 or 3 this season. So in that regard, Simmons' assist numbers should go up while his points production goes down. And as you've seen already with Embiid, he's been an absolute monster, been an absolute terror. He's had multiple 40-point productions, in the multiple 30-point productions just early on in the season. I don't think we'll see quite as many as those now that Butler's here, because he'll be able to take off a big chunk of the scoring burden from Embiid. I do still think that Embiid probably will average around 24, 25 points just because of how dominant he is, how his ability to get to the free throw line. Butler's a creator for others as well, so I'm sure he'll be able to create off the pick and roll with Embiid, because let's face it, until Butler came, there hasn't been a person that can run the pick and roll and that has been able to create a jump shot for themselves off of Embiid. Fultz and Simmons aren't jump shooters, but Butler is. So in that regard, that should open up even more avenues for easy buckets for Embiid once Butler pulls the defense off of Embiid while he rolls.
So
Embiid's
go ahead.
overall
Continue.
assist production should probably stay about the same, though.
The thing that concerns me a little bit, and we'll bounce from some of the, I think, simpler situations here with the addition of Butler to one that scares me a tiny bit, and that is Markelle Fultz, because you mentioned kind of how his game translates. You know, we've heard from Jimmy Butler that he can be a little bit difficult on young guys, and Markelle Fultz has obviously gone through a little bit. You know, he had the you want to call him the yips or whatever it is last year. This is obviously someone who's working on getting the mental side of the game down. I have to admit I'm a tiny bit concerned on what having a guy with Butler's reputation could potentially do to Markelle Fultz. Are you at all worried about that, or you think maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion a little bit?
I think it would be irresponsible to have at least to have zero concern. I do think there's some concern, but overall, Fultz's mental aptitude has slowly been gaining. His confidence has slowly been gaining throughout the season. We've seen it with his higher field goal percentages. Granted, 3-point shot's not there yet, which could possibly lead to a problem down the road. However, in the immediate return, I don't think that's going to be a huge deal. And we have to remember here, too, Butler's already put a bad name on himself for 2 locker rooms in both Chicago and Minnesota. If he wants to get paid top dollar, which we all know that he does, he's going to make sure that he is on his best behavior in Philadelphia, and that means not getting too hard after Markelle Fultz. And here's the other thing. I don't think the attitude in both Chicago and Minnesota were different in the attitude of winning. Embiid and Simmons are the leaders of the team. They already have set the precedence of winning a championship before the season even started. Markelle Fultz is obviously in line with that. Markelle Fultz, I don't think when it comes to winning, and Butler's main concern is winning. As long as Fultz is performing, especially on the defensive end, which we know he can, I don't think Butler's going to have too much to say to Fultz on the offensive side, because Butler himself was a late bloomer offensively. So we know that maybe he'll be more patient with Fultz on that end.
Now the other guys. Now the less big-name players. Embiid, Simmons, Fultz, these are the guys that everybody knows when they think about the Sixers, but this is going to clear out a little bit of space for some folks that people don't know as well. Guys that either came over, say, like Wilson Chandler recently from the Denver Nuggets, or guys that have actually been in Philadelphia for a little bit, like maybe a TJ McConnell or an Amir Johnson. I mean, okay, Amir Johnson is not obviously a direct beneficiary of this, or it might be a Mike Muscala, who is a relatively recent acquisition, but also kind of power forward style. Who soaks up some of the minutes now? Because, you know, I know Jimmy Butler was playing darn near 48 minutes a game when he's in there for Tom Thibodeau, but you're looking at, with Saric and Covington headed out, you're looking at about almost 60 minutes of playing time going the other direction, and Butler can't do that all by himself. So who soaks up some of the extra minutes now available for this Sixers team? Is it all Wilson Chandler? Is it some Muscala? Is it a blend of guys that I haven't even mentioned yet?
Well, as you mentioned, both Covington and Sark were traded, so there's an opening spot in the starting lineup. I believe that goes to J.J. Redick. Unlikely candidate, could be Landry Shamet, because Brown might just like Redick off the bench. Though if I was Brown, I would put Redick in the starting lineup. That's just my personal opinion, though. With that in mind, I do believe Shamet gets some more playing time. Muscala has seemed to work his way into the rotation as soon as he's healthy from his nose injury. I believe he gets back. Wilson Chandler's on a minutes restriction coming back from his injury, though it's entirely possible he does soak up more minutes once he's off restriction, and that could be anywhere from like 22 minutes to 28 minutes a game. It all just depends on how Brown likes to fiddle with his rotation. And my guess is that he would probably want defensive versatility more than anything. And Wilson Chandler does give him the best chance for that. Although Muscala and Shamet provide much better three-point shooting. Not to say that Chandler's a bad three-point shooter. However, with Shamet and Muscala, you can get bigger for certain matchups, and Shamet you can get quicker and play a faster paced tempo. It's just depending on how the game's work. Though my gut feeling says once Chandler's off of restriction from his recovering from his hamstring injury, he probably will be the one that gets the most minutes. Though I expect all three of those players to get a bump in minutes. It's kind of hard to see what T.J. McConnell has because he's been inconsistently getting playing time this last couple games.
It seems like just in kind of looking at the roster construction now, you've got a Jimmy Butler who has been slowly improving from three-point land, but it's not the dominant part of his game. You've got a Ben Simmons who is not comfortable out there. You've got a Markelle Fultz who, while the arena is yelling at him to take the three, it doesn't seem like he really wants to all that badly. It feels like, Lucas, this team is going to want as many shooters around this core as humanly possible. Does that seem like a reasonable attack strategy, or do they kind of zig where everybody's zagging and take the Lakers' path and just go to the hole every time?
I believe they do get more shooting, and there are a couple free agents still out there available, like Nick Young, former Sixers, who's a free agent that's obviously a sharpshooter. You could wait until the buyout period, buyout market starts in February, and hopefully maybe a player like Trevor Ariza or Luka Ba-Mute becomes available, because they could very much well become available once buyout market starts. Or you can make a trade, or maybe wait for Kyle Korver to get bought out too. But with Jared Bayless being sent to Minnesota, that was your one trade piece that you could get like a better player for because based off of Bayless's contract. So I don't think trading for a shooter would be the best option. I think most likely they'd wait to add a shooter via buyout, the buyout market. Though Muscala and Shamet will probably see a significant bump, as well as Wilson Chandler in minutes, because all three of them are three-point shooters, though Shamet and Muscala are clearly the better two of the three. So in that regard, I do believe Brown will surround them with shooting, but he won't compromise defense too greatly to get those shooters.
And just from sort of like an overall big picture standpoint, it seems like a guy like a J.J. Redick could really find a very nice role around these other superstars. He's done it for years, where he's been able to function kind of coming off of screens and just a ton of running. We saw it with the Clippers, where he was the fourth option on that team and he was still extremely productive. But really, when it comes right down to it, Lucas, isn't this gonna kind of be a four-man show at that point? Like, Robert Covington, he wasn't really known for ball-dominant stuff, and Saric wasn't a ball-dominant guy. You're bringing in a guy who's an alpha with a team that already has two alphas. There's just not going to be that much more to go around. How do the Sixers, as a team, how do they find that sort of that balance where other guys on the club can be ready to go at a moment's notice? This is really more of a reality thing than a fantasy question, I guess, but maybe I should rethink how I phrase the question. It just seems to me like maybe it's going to take a little bit of time. Does that seem reasonable?
It will take some time. Don't be surprised if you see Sixers players across the board have a dip in production when Butler first gets inserted into the lineup, including Butler himself. This isn't, and I wrote about this when I first wrote the story for the Sixers. This could take some time. There could be some bumps in the road. There could very well be some locker room issues. However, as long as the winning happens, those issues will be fixed. I think in time, Redick's production, I suspect that he might not score as much. His shooting percentage will probably be higher, but I don't think he'll score as much. Because Butler's able to create for others. As I said earlier, Butler's able to create for others as well as himself. So in that regard, Redick will benefit from Butler's presence and being able to pull defenders away from Redick. I think overall it will take some time. Don't be surprised if the Sixers start slowly with Butler in the lineup, and that's not because he's going to make them worse. I think it's Brown as well as the players trying to figure out how everybody meshes, because there's no training camp for this. They're playing it on the fly, and we've seen this in the past where superstar players get traded to a new team and they get a slow start. However, mid-season, they eventually pick it up, and I think that's going to be the case here. Could be very easily a tough 5 to 10 game stretch, but after that, I believe that they'll start picking it back up.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of seeing a similar thing out in Los Angeles. Lakers taking about 10 games, and now suddenly they've starting to look a whole heck of a lot better against good and bad teams alike. Last question for you, Lucas, and then we'll let you go. And this one's really more of a, we'll keep it lighthearted kind of thing. I mean, at the end of the day, your Sixers just got Jimmy Butler. How does that make you guys feel out that way?
It definitely gives the fan base a boost of confidence. I believe that this move because before this move, the Sixers were a tier below the Boston Celtics, Toronto Raptors, Milwaukee Bucks of the Eastern Conference. They had taken a step back for one reason or another. You could blame it on 5-10 different things, but at the end of the day, the Sixers took a step back.
No.
With this move, assuming this move obviously makes the Sixers better, this move puts the Sixers right up there with the top 3 teams in the East. And honestly, you can make an argument adding Butler could make the Sixers the favorite to win the Eastern Conference and make them a legitimate threat to the Golden State Warriors, assuming the Warriors get to the finals, because who doesn't assume that almost every year as long as you have KD and Steph Curry. So in that regard, I think Jimmy Butler does move the needle significantly in the Sixers' championship aspirations. And I think that the fan base is excited about that. They mourn the loss of Robert Covington and Dario Saric because they both were part of the process. They were big process guys. However, at the end of the day, losing them for a player of the caliber of Jimmy Butler puts the Sixers in a whole different tier.
Yeah.
Different tier.
I'm thinking
you have 3 superstars. That's enough to contend with almost any contender in the NBA now.
Yeah, I'm thinking you guys are feeling A-OK. Lucas Johnson, by the way, it should be noted, Lucas on Eastern Time, doing this segment with me close to midnight out your way with a newborn in the house. This is some heavy lifting, man. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much again.
Oh, no problem, man. I love being on.
Good luck to you guys. It's a sleepless stretch coming up, but it's a heck of a time, and hopefully I'll talk to you sooner than later. Thanks, Lucas.
Well, thank you.
One more big thank you to Lucas Johnson. Big Papa Lucas Johnson. Got that kid. Man, that's a big deal. I don't know about him. I didn't bring it up on the pod, but I was so stressed leading up to the birth of my child that the stresses afterwards were actually kind of diminished. I mean, the lack of sleep was overwhelming. Don't get me wrong. I was crying like a newborn myself in there. But when I was asleep, I slept better. I had I would wake up dizzy, freaking out, leading up to the birth of my child. I was just so worried that something was going to go wrong. Anyway, Lucas Johnson NBA is the Twitter handle. Give him a follow. And check out the SixerSense.com as well. Big thank you to Lucas talking Sixers. We'll get him on real soon. Again, He'll be back in the not-too-distant future, I've got to believe, because things are in flux out there, and we're going to want to know about it. Quickly here, I want to try to cram this thing in because we got a big Monday card, and I don't want to neglect that, but I also don't want this to be an hour and 15-minute podcast. 9-game Monday, Washington favored by 8 over the Orlando Magic. You got to sort of like Orlando a little bit in this one, don't you? I don't think I could pull the trigger on it. It's a very big line for a team on a back-to-back. Washington also has a little revenge on the brain. Orlando beat them by 9 in Orlando. 2 games back, so probably an avoid. I'd love to bet the Wizards on revenge, but 8 points is a big cover for a bad team. Toronto, New Orleans, a 9-point spread. Unusual, I know. Toronto's really good. Are they 9 points over an Anthony Davis team of any kind good? I don't know. Slightly into the underdog in this one. Miami, 2-point favorites over Philadelphia. Remember, they're 2 players down in this game. This is one Miami should win, but who knows with that club. Oklahoma City, 8.5 points. That's the spread. They've got their home court against the Phoenix Suns. Not touching that one. Utah, 3.5-point favorites on the road in Memphis. Grizzlies are not bad, guys. I do believe these teams met up recently. Just double-checking that. Grizzlies won by 10 in Utah. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a revenge thing going on here. But on the other side, Memphis is just a decent basketball team. So don't expect them to roll over, but lean to the Utah side in this one, despite the fact that it's sort of a kooky line. Minnesota, 3-point favorites at home to the Brooklyn Nets. I lean to Brooklyn in this one, unless we get word that a bunch of... Well, here's the thing. I'd rather fade Minnesota after all the new guys show up, because there's going to be that disjointed period, so maybe leave this one alone. Dallas, 1-point favorites in Chicago. That's a pretty accurate line. San Antonio, 2.5-point favorites in Sacramento. Are the Kings taking a step back is the question. After this really hot start, Sacramento has kind of run into a little bit of trouble. They beat Minnesota in there, but they've lost 3 of their last 4. They did not look good against the Lakers. Teams are starting to make a little bit of an adjustment. But at the same time, the Spurs, are they familiar with this? I don't think they've seen them yet. It's all about game planning. So I'd leave that one alone. And the Warriors, 3-point road favorites against the Clippers. Clippers have been surprisingly good. Coming off an overtime win over the Milwaukee Bucks at home. And now they got the Warriors. It's a tough stretch for LA. But they've been pretty good at home. I don't know. I wouldn't write them off. I do think the Warriors win this game. As we're recording the podcast, I believe we just got word that Draymond Green is expected to play, and that's a big deal for the Warriors, especially on the defensive side. From a fantasy standpoint today, what are we watching for? Well, not a whole lot in those early games. Orlando, Washington, we got a pretty good feel for it. New Orleans, Toronto, same kind of thing. Philly, fine. I mean, you can watch this thing, but Butler's not there yet, so I wouldn't go too crazy. Miami, we're always just sort of keeping an eye on. Magruder, how does his season play out? Are they settling into a rotation of some kind? Phoenix, one eye on TJ Warren, obviously, just to make sure he can sort of keep that thing going. Should Rashawn Holmes get some more minutes, that's something we'd keep an eye on as well. Oklahoma City, I think we can move on from the Jeremy Grant thing. I think it's fair to say that he's just a value. He's just in. At a certain point, you kind of just have to say, all right, I think this guy's passed the test. To me, that, we can always check his box score. We always will. But I think he's sort of passed the muster at this point. Passed muster. Is that the right expression? Doesn't matter. Utah, Memphis, we're looking at, of course, slow-mo all the time. The continued evolution. He's getting better every week. He seems like he's a little bit more comfortable. Brooklyn, Minnesota, we're keeping an eye on health with Brooklyn, but it does seem like there are too many mouths to feed out there at times. Minnesota, this is before they get their new guys, I think. So if everybody's still hurt, although it sounds like Jeff Teague might be back for this one, I think you play all your regulars from Minnesota, and you wait to see if the new guys are showing up. Dallas, Chicago, I don't know, man. Dallas is a frustrating team to deal with. San Antonio, Sacramento, we're watching Bogdan and his recovery. The Clippers, always one eye on the backcourt out there. And then the Warriors, the Quinn Cook stream, basically. That's what you're looking for tonight. So we're in one of these lulls again, guys. I think you've noticed it. And the season does have these kind of ebbs and flows where a bunch of guys pop up, and that happened in week 1, and that happened in week 3, and now we're entering week 5, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm betting by the middle of this week, we see another one of those flows where over the weekend we kind of had a little bit of an ebb. It's fun. You got to keep an eye on things all the time. You just never know when something's going to pop up. Homework assignment tonight. Let's see here. Let's look down the card and see which game is our homework assignment. I think, man, none of these games are a good homework assignment. No extra credit today. Screw it. We'll knock it off the board. No extra credit. If you really want it, watch Phoenix. I want to see what Rashawn Holmes is doing. I want to see what TJ Warren's doing. I want to see how their rotations are going. But I think I have a pretty good feel for a lot of these teams right now. There's not a big change. And obviously when Philly and Minnesota get their new players in, those teams are going to be homework assignment. But it's Monday night. They're not there yet. No homework, guys. Enjoy your Veterans Day. That's right. We're going to turn this this is a scholastic endeavor. I did not promo anything on today's podcast, and that feels weird. So we're going to do that right now. Follow me on Twitter, at Dan Besbris, at HoopBallFantasy, and at HoopBallTweets. By the way, I'm on Instagram now. That happened yesterday. I don't use it, though. It's also at Dan Besbris, but I don't use it, so, don't worry about it. Other things to promote. I want to thank everybody for joining the DraftKings Beat the Expert promo on Thursday of last week. It's going to be on Wednesday this week. I assume the same rules, although we'll know more by later on today. We'll certainly pump that link out. Hopefully that everybody played in week 1. We'll do it again here in week 2. Micah Patrio will be in it. I think Brew's going to be back in the Beat the Pros Expert. We'll be giving about a hoop ball t-shirt to the winning team, the team with the most points in that contest. And then the top 10, as it was last time, won $15 a piece on a $3 entry. So it's a pretty sweet tournament. Hopefully you guys can pop back into that thing. Again, if you just follow all of us on Twitter, you'll see these alerts as they go by. And of course, if you want the premium membership, you can get it just by signing up for a new account at DraftKings and putting $10 in your bucket. Easy. You go to hoop-ball.com, click on the premium tab, choose the free promo. There's a free thing. It says get it free with DraftKings. You click that link, and then basically as long as you navigate through to DraftKings from the Hoopball portal, when you sign up with your new account and put $10 in it, you get the Hoopball premium membership for the year for free. That's a $25 value. And you're getting it for the $10 deposit. Play 3 times in our Beat the Expert contest for $9. And if you win any of them, you win $15. So you could actually end up money. You could end up a lot of money if you end up really good at DFS. But you could win money and get the premium membership. You got to do it. If you don't have a DraftKings account, you have to do this. It's the way. It's the perfect way. It's the perfect way to get your premium membership and get involved in our Beat the Expert contest. Okay, I've officially promoted something. I feel better. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody. Again, we'll be talking to Eric Goldman of Canis Hoopus tomorrow about the Minnesota side of the big Jimmy Butler trade. And then the week will continue with more fantastic guests. Ben Vasconcelos of Wiz of Oz. We'll be talking to Ryan Buchanan. He's with the Blazers Edge. We got Brewski later on this week. Oh, the fun doth not stop. I am Dan Besbris. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.